Welcome to the KOMO Sports End Zone podcast with KOMO Sports Director Niko Tamurian and Najee Moye.
Hey, welcome to the KOMO Sports End Zone off-season edition, and certainly we always love talking Seahawks, and certainly we like to take a look at what's going on with this team. And believe it or not, Najee, it's like, okay, what are you talking about late May and early June, mid-June? But the reality is when you get to this point, like training camp's around the corner, and training camp's when it really starts. You get into preseason games and, of course, to the regular season. So this is actually cliche to say important time of year, but it's actually a time when you really can learn a little bit of something about the new team.
I think it's definitely important, especially considering of the type of turnover that the Seahawks have had this year. I mean, if you just take last year's depth chart, at least on the offensive side, and you look at this year's, it's basically night and day. It's very, very different. Even the scheme of offense, the type of offense that this team will play, ideally, that we kind of predict that they will play, will be very different. And there's a lot of different pieces. Second-year head coach Mike McDonald has a lot of different pieces. A defensive head coach, so a lot of different new pieces. New quarterback, new receivers, less receivers. And I mean, the receiving core is just completely different. And that's why it's so important to see how this new quarterback and these new receivers, with a defensive-minded coach, a new offensive line, all these things. This is the first time that they've been on the field together for OTAs, which is just kind of a getting to know you thing. But Niko, you've been there all week. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Sam Darnold, the new Seahawks probable definite starting quarterback. What have you noticed about him on the field?
Yeah, and before I get into Darnold, I think you hit on something that's really important here. I think this is the most impactful OTA.
It's huge.
It very much since Russell got traded. Like that. I mean, that would be the only comparable. But and even in that respect, okay, it was Russell and Bobby leaving. There was still a lot of other guys. There was still, the same coordinators and things of that sort. I'm not trying to underscore how much different it was without Bobby and Russell.
Sure.
But my point is it could be the most impactful OTA since even longer than that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a big deal. And so listen, because if the offense is good, this team will be very good.
Right. Because
we know the defense is elite. We talked about it all late last season. And so when you look at it in that perspective, all eyes are on Sam Darnold and even Drew Lock and even Jalen Milroe. All eyes are certainly on K9 and Zach Charbonnet, but how about Damian Martinez and how he may fit into things? Because as Abraham Lucas put it earlier in the week, he's like, we want to be elite at one thing. And what he means by that is, of course they want to be good at passing. He's like, well, if we're elite at running and creating holes and things like that, they're going to try and beat teams that way. And that's the idea here. That's why they spent a first-round pick on Gray Zabel on the offensive line. And so let's talk about Darnold to your question.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I've always been a proponent that it's really difficult to put stock in how a guy looks in shorts and shoulder pads.
Sure. I mean, it's beautiful weather in Seattle. What else are you going to wear?
No, seriously. And the quarterbacks wear the throwbacks at practice.
Yeah, which is
really
great.
Cool.
Yeah.
And everybody else wears the regular jersey, so to speak.
Right.
Which, by the way, I bought my son a throwback DK cap jersey last year.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, and then he, my son's only 3, so it's like he doesn't know any better.
So
I bought him the generic fan one.
There you go.
As the replacement.
The 12.
But so with all that preface about the shorts and shoulder pads, I think Sam was a bit of a roller coaster.
Okay.
But am I putting too much stock in it? No.
Okay.
Were there times that I was like, oh, throw was a little bit behind? No, there was a pick there. So Julian Love had a really nice pick. I think Reek Woolen had one. There was one pass that went past the end zone and into my arms, and I did catch it.
We've seen you catch the ball on KOMO before, so it's not the first time.
No, so am I leaving OTAs being like, whoo, that Darnold?
Right.
No, but it's also understanding that everything's new, like you said.
Very new.
And this is just the installation of the Clinton Kubiak offense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Darnold's familiar with it when he worked with Kubiak in San Francisco, and they've talked about that quite a bit. But I think it's everybody getting used to each other because, you can't just suddenly, because Sam Darnold's talented, because Cooper Kupp's talented, because Marquez Valdez-Scantling is talented, or Elijah Arroyo is talented. You can't just throw all these guys together and instantly they're going to gel.
Right.
It's going to take some time. So what's the number one thing you're going to see when guys aren't quite used to each other just yet? Is timing. So were there interceptions? Yeah. Were there some throws that were behind or ahead of guys? Yeah. I saw one that Cooper Kupp made a great effort to try and catch it just out of his reach, and Sam knew it,
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a fool's errand to get worried about that right now. And I've seen some other, publications and reports out there like, oh, Darnold looked rough. He didn't look outstanding?
Right.
I'll admit that, but also I don't think it's a concern. I think it's more of like getting acclimated.
You need a getting used to period though.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is.
If we're having these talks like in October, but we're in June. We're in shoulder pads and shorts, as you mentioned.
And part of that is I also think that Milrow's arm has looked better than advertised.
Yeah,
we all know Jalen's mobile and
he's got
like that, but his passes have had some nice zip on it.
Right.
And Drew Lock has looked really good.
Really.
And so that's also been part of like if you're just watching perception. But I don't think it's necessarily a knock on Darnold. I think Sam's going to be fine. But I think it's also really cool for the 12s out there that know that Locke and Milrow look really good.
Drew Lock got some time serving as a starter for the Giants last year.
Yeah.
I think that may have helped his confidence a little bit. Drew Lock, if you've seen him on the sidelines, even in his Denver days, he's having a different confident guy. And I think a lot of people are excited to see.
Drew Lock.
Yeah. As a Giants fan, I said he was a lock to start for the second half of the year last year. And Jaden Milrow, he's a guy who's going to see playing time one way or the other.
Yeah.
As the Seahawks quarterback, maybe not the starting quarterback, but he'll get on the field because he's just so fast.
Right.
He's just so dynamic offense. I mean, he's a guy you want to start. If you're playing Madden, you want to have Jaden Milrow on your team.
Right, because you have to have a mobile quarterback.
You have mobile quarterback. Exactly. Yeah. So you talked about Gray Zabel a little bit. If the Seahawks not exactly known for drafting offensive linemen in the first round, but they did. What do you think?
I think that the offensive line, I mean, first of all, that had to be addressed.
It had to be addressed.
And not just because it had to be addressed no matter what kind of offense you were trotting out there, but also from the standpoint that we know this team wants to run the ball.
Right.
They want to win on the ground. And that means that's why they drafted, I keep mentioning Damian Martinez in the 7th round, but that's why they drafted him. Because you already had K9, Charbonnet, Kenny McIntosh, but we all saw, you need the depth.
Yeah.
K9's had health issues and stuff like that. But back to your point about the line, it was really nice to see the left side of the line is set with Charles Cross and Gray Zabel.
Right. And
will be a strength of this team.
A strength. Okay.
Abe Lucas, he has had injuries. He talked to us the other day, as I mentioned. He said, it's been night and day to have an off season where he's not rehabbing.
Right.
That was a long knee injury that was kind of lingering, but he feels really good. He's actually started a social media page with him lifting.
Oh, love that.
It's like a fitness page. Yeah.
There you go.
And he's like, everybody's like, so what do you weigh right now? Like 280? Because he's cut up now.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm still 325. He's like, trust me, I had to weigh myself.
He's a cut up to 325?
Yeah.
That's
that's
good to hear.
So that bodes well in every sense of the word when you're looking at that line.
Right.
Now they're still figuring out right guard and center. You got Olu and Jalen Sundell figuring out the center spot. To me, I'm not an offensive line guru. I'm not saying Olu didn't look good, but Jalen, I think, popped for me a little bit.
Okay. And
then the right guard, it looks like Christian Haynes, the 2024 third round pick. Did I say that right? Yeah. And then of course you have Anthony Bradford there as well. They're battling for it. Would you have liked to have seen them in the offseason get maybe another experienced guard? Yeah. Yeah. I still think the jury's out on that offensive line a little bit, but I will say it's a marked improvement from what we've seen in years past.
When you consider things, the things that can go wrong for a team early, we consider a quarterback taking a lot of sacks on the run. We saw that with Geno Smith a lot last year, and also coming into a new system, Sam Darnold coming into a new old system kind of for him. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, but I think now is the time. Now it's time to build rapport, to build chemistry, to get chemistry, not with the other side of the team, but definitely with the offense and the new receivers. Cooper Kupp, like you said, reaching out for that ball, trying to get it, but they know that,
There's something about this system and whether Quint Kubiak's system, you have to be, and this is like obvious, but they've made a point emphasis to say, this has got to be a fit for our offense, obviously, or finding guys that are familiar. So like, I'll start with the offensive line and guys that fit. We're seeing a little bit of a shift because the passing game will primarily be under center, kind of bootlegs, rolling Darnold out of the pocket.
Classic, like 90s style.
Right. Because they're going to run because they're going to use the play action quite a bit. And whereas last year, Geno was in shotgun most plays. I mean, I'm not saying he was never under center, but it was Ryan Grubb coming from the college game. It was much more college oriented. This will be much more pro style. And so when you're talking about rolling Darnold out, you need
time.
Linemen. Yes, you need time.
Yeah.
You need linemen that are a little bit more mobile than you might think.
Right.
And that's what you're getting with some of these guys.
Okay.
Guys that can, not just push up front, but can pull.
Right.
And be
and
with
not
Darnold
hold.
to protect him and not hold.
And
to the other part about guys that are familiar with the system, Clint Kubiak said on Wednesday that it was a point that they really wanted to get Marquez Valdez-Scantling because he really fit well in Quint's offense.
Right.
He's underrated his speed. And I was shocked when I met him the first time at VMAC. I'm like, this guy is a lot taller than I thought. He's 6'4".
Yeah.
Is he as massive as DK? No. But does he have to be? No.
Sure.
So that's the thing here. all this sounds great,
Right.
but will it actually play out? We'll find out.
We'll see. We'll definitely see. And just really quickly, you said that Sam Darnold threw a couple passes to the defense, which is not ideal. Talk about the defense. This is part of the Seahawks' strong point.
I love this defense.
Yeah,
I do. I think that I know everybody talks about the parallels of Mike McDonald when he was in Baltimore, and his defense when he took over there was struggling for the first few games, or at least not as good as it ended up being. And then they got Roquan Smith, and then bam, it was awesome.
Yeah.
And then you saw the parallels we talked about often on this show that you got to a certain point, the defense wasn't playing that great. Everybody's like, well, where's this defensive guru? Well, then he got his guy in Ernest Jones, and then Tyrese Knight, the 5th round pick rookie last year, comes on, and this defense was lights out. It was really good. It almost single-handedly got them to the playoff after that really, really tough stretch of games. So, I think that I'm really into this defense. Ernest is still coming back from injury, but we saw him a little bit out there. The defensive secondary is really good.
Right.
We already knew that.
Right.
But you added Nick Emenwari to the mix. And that's been the big thing to me. The first thing that stands out to you about Nick Emenwari is how massive
he's
this guy is.
Large guy.
I'm like, that guy's that's Emenwari. And I watched a lot of film on the guy. I wrote a whole article about why I thought he'd be a first-round pick.
Right.
But he's that different. And so you've got,
and he wants to be Cam Chancellor.
And he's that big and he's that fast.
Wow.
He can close ground like that. And so he can make a big hit to prevent a big play, or he can get an interception. And him being in let's say you put him in a safety spot. I'm being very broad with this. He's going to do a lot of different things.
Right.
But you put him out in the safety spot along with Julian Love. And then your corner spots are Spoon and Reek Woolen.
The secondary is going to be nasty.
The secondary looks really
good. We circle back to the Sam Darnold part real quick. And somebody's like, can you even blame the guy for throwing 2 picks? It's more like, did he throw picks or did they intercept the ball? It's very
there was
different.
plays being made. I mean, exactly. Julian Love, the one I talked about, he just dashed into
and that's one thing that you'll see is that a lot of times these great quarterbacks will get diced up because of their defense that they go against in practice is that good. Maybe that's good for Sam Darnold in your long run. Maybe that's better for Jaden Milroe in the long run. Seeing NFL practice, I don't know. We'll see.
No, I think you're right. It's like your practice. It's like when you talk about some of these elite basketball players, and they talked about how they used to play, like they'd be 12 playing against like seniors in high schools.
That only makes you better.
It makes you better.
Makes you better.
And so the defense is going to be very good. And I really like what they bring to the table. And I've been really impressed by all the rookies, both sides of the ball. The 2 guys that, when you talk about the rookie class, Naj, that you walk to the field, and like, who the hell is that? It was Emenwari and it was Elijah Arroyo. Because not just their size, like they're football players, but their speed and athleticism. Like Arroyo made a really nice catch. I think it was from Drew Lock. And it was a nice ball from Drew, but I just remember saying, like, holy cow, that guy's got receiver speed, but he's a tight end. Like, he's a tight end in every way.
I've watched him a lot in college. He was on that Cam Ward Hurricanes team with Damian Martinez too.
Yeah.
Quality tight end.
Yeah. So
he's a guy who I was happy the Seahawks drafted him. I think if you listen to podcasts before, I was like, I'm hiring this guy because he'll block. He's a huge guy, and he almost seems like a basketball player out there. Most tight ends do.
Yeah.
He's going to be a game buster, I think, for them.
No question about it. And so that's the other thing. You talk about when the offense really gets rolling. By the time we get to training camp, which is about 6 weeks away, preseason 2 months from now.
Right.
I think you're going to see some of the flaws that reporters may have talked about on social media on the offense. I think you can see a lot of that corrected. Yeah, it's a new look offense, but it's also going against that defense and that secondary.
Yeah.
And, we talked about how they didn't exactly replace DK Metcalf. Like everybody loves the Cooper Kupp signing. I think Valdez-Scantling will be a good player for this team too, obviously. But you're also doing it in the aggregate with a guy like Arroyo because this is a totally different offense. It's going to be a lot of 11 personnel. They're going to have a fullback. They're going to run a fullback. Yeah, they drafted a kid from Alabama, and Brady Russell switched from tight end to fullback. There will be a fullback on the field quite often.
I think a lot of Seahawks fans are happy to hear that.
Yeah, and they are committed to the ground game. That's what they, like I said, Abraham Lucas says they want to be elite with. But then on top of that, they still want to, you got to keep everybody honest. And when you talk about passing out of that kind of situation, it is not the passing game of the last couple of years. It's a throwback almost approach, but one that can be effective. You're sucking the defense in thinking they're going to be trying to tackle Kana in the backfield. Then you kind of dunk it to Elijah Arroyo. I'll tell you what, that guy's going to make at least a couple guys miss and be off for the races potentially.
There you go.
So you start to see the vision when you see guys like that.
The vision is good. I've like I said, I've got high hopes for this team. You know, things are coming together. You have to. This is the talk it out phase.
Yeah,
you know,
7.5 wins being the over under in Vegas, I think is ridiculous.
it's insane. It's insane.
Like we talked about like 10. You know,
10 is the expectation.
I mean,
8.
Like. Even if you had 8, which would be a disappointment of a season, like you'd still win the bet.
Right.
I think it's silly, and I think it's part of it is just like it's just people on the outside saying, "Well, they lost Geno and DK." Well, you know, maybe in this system, you might be better off. You're never better when you lose a star like DK Metcalf. He's just one of one. But you're doing things totally differently so that you mitigate that loss in a lot of ways too.
That's true. That's true.
But OTAs were fun.
I'm happy you had fun.
Camp coming up in like less than 2 weeks.
I'm happy. Minicamp is gonna be fun.
17th to 19th.
We're getting closer. I've had a thought about a fantasy football team name.
Okay.
I can't tell you right now. I'm workshopping.
Okay.
But I've had thoughts about it. That's how you know things are happening.
Future show, we'll get it done.
We'll get it done.
Yeah, this was fun, Nash.
This was fun. I like talking to OTAs with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we'll come back from minicamp in a couple weeks. And then, of course, the players will take a month off, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we will. Najee and I will think of ways we can preview the season, our keys to it. And then, of course, training camp gets started. First preseason game against Pete Carroll and the Raiders. And, of course, the regular season opener September 7th with the 49ers in town. That's some pretty cool stuff right there. So for Najee, I'm Niko. This has been the KOMO Sports End Zone OTA edition.